What's up, good people? Hello, hello, and hello again. You all know what time it is. It's Wind Down Wednesday. Hold on, wait 1 minute. We may not be sipping wine tonight, but it's still Wind Down Wednesday. And y'all know who I am. I'm Sandy. I'm your host. I'm sitting here for another fabulous week. It's been a wonderful time. We've had a great time. The conversation last week was off the charts. And we're only just beginning again. We like to keep it 110% on here. We like to keep it real. We're honest and straightforward and to the point. But let me let you know one thing that's most important. We do love the Lord. And don't be afraid to say hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, in the comments. So with that being said, I am Sandy, and welcome to Wind Down Wednesday. And I'm going to let Miss Jones take it over because she's the moderator for this evening.
Thank you, Sandy from Tuck Radio. Welcome back. Welcome back. Today is part 2 of our conversation of leading from the seat that you are in, a conversation with Black leaders on anti-racism and leadership in the workplace. I am Latricia Jones, your moderator this evening. I am the Chief Integration Officer from 2B LLC. And thank you so much again, Sandy from Tuck Radio, for offering your platform for this very, very important conversation. If you missed the conversation last week, that's okay. That is all right, because you are in luck. We have our dynamic panelists back this week. We're going to do some quick introductions of everybody. So once I call your name, if you could just give the world a hello raise. First, we have Ify Bell. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at 2B LLC. This week, we're going to have Sandy Tucker from Tuck Radio, CEO and host. Jesiah Brock, YMCA Director of Operations and Impact Center. We also have all the way from Africa, Kumbu Phiri, who is the National Director of the John Maxwell Company, Zimbabwe chapter of Equip Zimbabwe and Transformation Africa. We also have Carlyn, Crawley, CEO and founder of the Femtourage. I hope I said that right, Carlyn, from Femtourage. We also have Sonia Jackson Myles, CEO and founder of the Sister Accord. And we also have a co-moderator, Ashley Phelps. She is in the background. She is going to be the one that's monitoring all of your chats and responding back to chat. So please talk to us, speak back to us, engage with us through the chat. So as a brief recap of the conversation of last week, is that it only takes one to start a movement against racism in the workplace. We all have to show up with confidence, curiosity, and an open mind, and be willing to create the conversation together. Allies, we need you. Yes. We need your support. We need you to show up with us and engage. I am because you are. Contact information and resources will be they will be posted in the chat, because we have a panelist full of experts in this space, and so they have given and they have linked out their own personal networks and contacts to kind of help us keep this conversation going beyond today. And before we get started, I know I am taking a long time to recap, but before we get started, we're going to get started really, really soon. I just want to remind you of our core values. We went over this last week, and we want to bring it back this week. This is a safe space of all teach and all learn. Come open-minded with curiosity. And we will not be afraid to agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. All right, we ready to get started? So last week, before we closed out, Sandy Tucker posed a very, very important question. Now, she gave everybody some homework, so I hope you did your homework. Mm-hmm. We have a very, very important question on the table. What is the difference between racism and prejudice? That's That's a deep question. What is the difference between racism and prejudice? A lot of people will intertwine both of them, using them all with the same definition, but they are really different. They are truly different.
Mm-hmm.
We all have bias, and we have to be very cognizant to check our biases at the door, especially during such important conversations that we are getting ready to have this evening. As a human race, we have to be very courageous, and we have to be able to lift as we climb, including Black leaders and our allies. One of the core values of 2B LLC is that we are all leaders. Everyone is born with a degree of leadership flowing through our blood. And it is up to all of us to help to cultivate that leadership in every one of us. All right. Who would like to kick off that conversation around that question? What is the difference between racism and prejudice? Actually, I'm going to have Sandy start that conversation. She posed that very important question last week.
Hello, and I'm back again. And yes, because I look at it this way. Should we add discrimination in that too? Now, let me say this. The reason why I posed that question is because there is a huge difference, and we say it all the time. I think before, when we had our little session with each other, we talked about it briefly. The difference is, this is my personal opinion, people. I'm not a professional at this. We all have a prejudice. We all have biases, but are we all racist? If I walk around and I paint my face black, what does that mean? Am I a racist? If I walk around treating people differently with a bag or something with the eyes cut out, let me just say it, with the KKK over my head and in my entire body, am I a racist because of how I treat people? Very interesting. I am prejudiced. I do have biases, but deep down in my heart, mind, body, and soul, I'm not a racist because I do as what God says. We're supposed to treat everybody the same, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your gender or your religion. And I also asked this question: if we weren't so caught up in the color of our skin and the fact that I'm a female, I'm a Black female, why is it that on applications, there's always, are you Black, white, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, or other? Should it make a difference? Hatred in your heart is a form of racism. Prejudice, biases, that's what I say my prejudice is. Do I have hatred in my heart? No, there is a difference. Hatred and bias. It's my personal opinion of how I feel. The difference is between racism and prejudice.
All right.
Wow.
So, I think, the question is, if you're not a racist or you're not racist, right, then what are you?
Well, so I have some different takes on bias and racism and prejudice. I have some folks who would say to me, in corporate America, I served as the diversity champion at all companies that I was working for, because that was so important for me to figure out ways to create programs and curriculum and just things that could bring everyone together to help the organization go to another level of excellence. And so, people would say, well, can Black people be racist? Can Hispanics be racist? Or is that a label for a particular group? And we started to talk about systems, right? And power. And can you use your beliefs against a particular group based on the system? Do you have the power and control to do that? And so then people would then connect racism with the majority, and we have to say majority in the US because we know people of color are the majority in the world, right? But here in the US, then does that say that the only people in this country who can be racist are white people? Right. And we know that there are lots of other isms that come into place. Colorism. I mean, we got some stuff in our own. Okay. Colorism is a whole nother conversation. But what I have always spent time talking about in all of the training that I do on unconscious bias is making sure that everyone understands that we all have it. Every single person, anybody who says that they don't have bias is not telling the truth.
They're not telling the truth.
We all have it. The question becomes, how do you use those views as you interact with other people? Are you harming? Are you using them for harm? Are you trying to keep people oppressed? What are you doing? What is the behavior associated with these different things? And I think we have to peel them apart. I don't think you can make generalizations and stereotypes around it. I think we have to pick it apart and really talk about the specific actions and intent that drives the outcomes and behaviors.
So if we say, so would this be a racist statement? Asians are better at math.
It's a stereotype. It's a halo effect stereotype. And guess what? They hate it. So when I was doing my training, they were like, do you know how much pressure that puts on me if I'm not great at math? And what that does to people who aren't great. So it's interesting because there are stereotypes that are much more positive in nature, and there are negative stereotypes. People will say, hey, all Black people can dance. Listen, my mother, God bless her soul in heaven, I know she's looking down, she's with us right now. The woman didn't have 1 ounce of rhythm in her body. And Latricia is raising her hand. Okay. So we have these different, all Black people can play sports or whatever it is, right? So stereotypes and generalizations will always come back and bite you in the butt. They always will. So I call that a stereotype.
So, but do you think people think that is a racist statement? Because you and I know that people walk around every day putting people in categories.
Yeah.
Which what you just said is stereotyping. Yeah. So do you think that is a racist statement that's been, go back to your country? Well, what country is that? Because I got so much stuff in my body, I don't really know where I came from.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. That's why we have to sit and have these conversations so that we can peel back all of this stuff and really understand what's at the root of it. Those are great dialogue.
Sonia, you mentioned, I'm sorry, Carlyn, were you going to say something?
Problem. Well, yeah, only because just to answer Sandy's question, I think that we have to decide what context we're looking at a situation. Because if we're thinking about the workplace, there's prejudice, which is I don't like you because you're Black. There's, regular racism, not regular racism, but just racism, which is I treat you differently because you're Black. And then there's institutional racism, which is where I'm going to block you from succeeding because you're Black. I'm going to change the rules. I'm a keep moving the finish line so that you can't get where I am. That's institutional racism. And so I think that in the day and age that we're in now, institutional racism is the part that we have to focus on, the part that's systemic, the part that people try to gaslight us into believing does not exist, that kind of invisible cloud, because that prejudice turns into racism when Karen doesn't like you because you're Black, but then Karen gets promoted to manager, and now she has the power to say whether or not you get ahead. So now prejudices are now, that's racism, because now I guarantee she's not the only Black person that she thinks is icky, right? Black people are icky, and she won't say that though. She'll use words like sketchy or, whatever else.
laid back.
And then now we have a system where Black people can't get ahead in a specific organization, and then there's a domino effect. If we focus on that systemic part, where we create an environment where we choke it out and that racism cannot exist, then the hearts will follow, because the prejudice stuff, that's hard work, like Sonia was talking about last week, right? That's the hard stuff, the emotional part that we have to work on within ourselves. But if we create environments where institutional racism just can't thrive, the hearts will follow.
Yes, Carlyn, that's a very good point. And I believe what Sonia said last week was racism is an issue of the heart. And I also wanted to bring in what Sonia just talked about, the systems, the creator of the systems that allow the racism and the prejudice to actually filter and infiltrate, the workplace. Kubukani, can you please elaborate on the systematic racism and the institutionalized racism that Carlyn briefly touched on?
Sure. And I wanted to also comment on the prejudice, that I can be prejudiced and not be racist, but if I'm racist, I am prejudiced. And I think it's almost like with racism, all these, so you do stereotype, you do put people in a box because you're wanting to uphold a specific system. Now, systems, my God, I think it's critical for us to understand that the foundation of a system is an idea. And that idea develops into a thought process. So there's actually an intentional thought process. So a racist intentionally knows what they're doing. Now, of course, when you're a child, so if I'm a parent and I'm modeling that to my child, initially the child may not understand why they're doing it, because initially as a child, you things are caught, they're not taught, isn't it? You're watching what's being modeled to you. But at some point, that thought process becomes an action. Now, as I continue that action of racism, it becomes a thought pattern. So it's becoming a bit more systematic. And then it becomes a habit. So it's habitual. It's what I do naturally, how I treat Black people naturally. And then as I continue that habit, it becomes what I call a thought system. And at that point, I'm able to institutionalize it, and we begin to create systems. And then I talk about a thought fortress. Now, last week we talked about the spirituality of this thing, because I actually believe that, evil spirits are not disembodied spirits. They need a house to live in. And so if we were to talk of a demonic spirit exists because of idolatrous ideas that have been institutionalized. And so the best way to deal with an evil spirit is not to cast it out and have a power encounter. It's to actually pull down the system. Because once you can pull down the system, then you deal with the heart. And so for me, once you go beyond the thought system, you then create a thought kingdom. And that's why, as an African, I understand that, because we were colonized, so Zimbabwe, it's only 40 years ago, there was a whole kingdom, a minority group of white people actually dominated the majority. So it was a thought kingdom. But I want to say this as I close on that point. It's quite interesting that once we removed the white people, but we didn't change the system, Black people started dominating other Black people. And this is a very important point, that why we must be able to address it as a system, even though in America, for example, because you have majority whites, but in Zimbabwe, we've actually gotten rid of most of our whites, and now we're dominating each other, and then it becomes tribal, or it's linked to political power. But at the end of the day, you have a small group of people that want to dominate others.
Oh,
we need a praise break. We need a praise break in there for me.
That is it, brother. And what happens is the people in power take on the behaviors of the oppressor, and they start oppressing. That's exactly what I've been talking about.
Jesiah, I see it is burning. You have a burning desire to say something, Jesiah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, Carlyn, go ahead. Ladies first, and then
I'll make it quick because you haven't spoken yet. But I think that conversation comes up a lot, even when we talk about police brutality right now, because we're like, oh, sometimes the Black cops are bad too. And I'm like, well, listen, I don't think we really need to be having conversations about the actions of individual police officers. We need to be looking at the machine that makes that behavior acceptable. And And that's the real problem. That kind of goes back to what you were saying, Kumbu. It's not the people. If you break down the system, then the hearts will follow.
Wow.
So
Y'all up in the house today.
I'm off my soapbox. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So last time Pastor Kumbu talked a little bit about this root system and then the leaves. Now, so let's focus on the roots for a moment. We are talking about this system that we think exists, when really the system really it's called the kingdom of darkness. Yeah, we're about to go there. And so what happens is you have the kingdom of God and you have the kingdom of darkness. So we can pull down all of these man-made structures, these systems that we see with our eyes, but in reality, it's a spiritual system that is designed to promote the things of Satan. So that's why it doesn't matter. Kumbu, you gave the perfect example. You removed the white people, yet the approach was the same. Why? It's because it's a spiritual system. It's a kingdom of darkness that is ruled by Satan himself. That is why we must die to sin to be born again in the kingdom of God. And so unless we deal with the spiritual issue of it, it doesn't matter. You can switch the person, it doesn't matter. Now I want to address this concept that says that Black people can't be racist. If it really is a matter of the heart, then it doesn't matter what the vessel is. If it's a spiritual thing, the spiritual thing can affect anything that has a heart. Black, white, Chinese, whatever it is, because it's a spiritual issue. And so we keep putting these natural approaches to spiritual issues, and that's why nothing continues to change. And I think it needs to be addressed. I can preach at it all day, but if I'm not dealing with the spiritual thing that's affecting the vessel, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that's why Jesus came to deal with the heart. He came to deal with the spiritual matter. The word of God says that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, but against powers, but against rulers of darkness and high places. So if we don't deal with those things, then nothing will ever change. You're just repeating the cycle. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but it's the truth. And we continue to be tricked by these things in the physical when really it's the spirit. No, don't get me wrong. The physical stuff matters. Like if you punch me, it hurts. I felt that. But the root of the issue is not physical. The root of the issue is a spiritual thing. And unless we deal with that, then nothing will ever change.
So let me, yes. So I totally understand what you're saying on that, Jesiah. But to have some, to have something that people can take away and be very clear about what they can do as they go to work tomorrow. Recognize that corporations, organizations do not have a soul.
But the people that are in them do.
I'm gonna just say it again, because we gotta sit in some of this stuff, right? Because this stuff is deep and it has lots of layers. So what happens is we always skim and have the conversations up here, right on the top. But we got to go deep into this thing. So corporations don't have souls. People do.
We do.
So what we have to do, and this goes back to what I was saying last week, is we have to be committed to doing the heart work, which is the hard work. Nobody ever wants to roll up the sleeves and say, what do we really need to do? But that is going to be necessary in order for us to break or to evolve the systems, whatever you want to call it, eradicate the systems that continue to perpetuate the hate, the imbalance, the whatever you want to call it. We have to get to the root of that and understanding why these things were put in place. So we've been fighting this 400-year battle. Why were those things put in place? And what are we going to commit to each other to do? And it's going to take everybody, by the way. One particular group is not going to be able to do it all on their own. How do we come together to address the root of those issues, help people understand why those things were put in place in the first place, and then talk about what are the actions that we're going to put in place to eradicate it? That's the kind of, I think, holistic viewpoint and conversation that we need to have to get everybody on the same playing field of understanding, because many people don't truly understand this thing. They haven't studied it. And then being clear about what we're going to do to eradicate the imbalance and really drive for equity for everyone.
Yeah.
But you gotta recognize it. If you don't recognize it, then how are you going to make a difference and be a change? Because if you're going to ignore it, then what is the point? But you got to recognize it first. And a lot of times, a lot of people don't recognize it, or they don't want to recognize it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we have to call people in, not call people out.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to call people into the conversation, right? Like I said last week, we have to lead with grace and curiosity, right?
Yep.
And so, when we're working with clients, the thing that we're often saying is, culture will eat strategy all day long for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, late night meals, and the bag of chips under your bed. Okay. So, it doesn't matter, right? So if you don't think about the culture that you're cultivating, right? And how are the people you have in that culture cultivating that culture, right? Who are you hiring, right? What are hiring practices, right? You have a diversity and equity initiative, statement, policy, one word, one sentence on a piece of paper somewhere buried in the back of the manual, then there should be some questions on the application that you should be asking to understand where people stand, right? There should be ongoing efforts, training, right? Engagement, conversations, right? And as leaders, you can't, if you don't know nothing, you can't do nothing about it, right? And so the awakening, we've seen it. There's awakening happening for people. As somebody said last week, the window is open, and if we don't get in it, it's going to close, and then we're going to have to pry that joker back open. Then all the wind going to blow out of it. The window probably going to blow out again, because I don't think it's no glass in this window, just so y'all know. But, it's those types of things. And I think, someone said, we do this surface stuff, right? We can't do the surface stuff, right? No. So, like Latricia said, we believe everybody is a leader, right? And we've got to cultivate that. So if you are working the McDonald's drive-through window, you're a leader. You have an obligation to lead, right? But Jesiah said last week, lift as you climb, but take a break, right? I'm paraphrasing, right? If you can't lift at this moment, don't try to lift it, right? But if you can lift, I don't care if you're at the Kroger's cash register, if you're at the McDonald's drive-through, wherever you are, if you're in church, if you're in your family, right? Being a leader is not about your title, not about your corporation, not about your paycheck, not about your retirement, it's not about that. That's right. And so how do we show up? When are you going to lead? Are you waiting on an invitation? Invitation issued. Next. Right. So, we have to stop putting all these reasons in front of us as to why we won't engage. And as people who are sitting in the leader of others and leader of leaders and functional leader positions, you have even more significant obligation to do this work, right? And to create this space and to ensure that you don't just take the executive team in a room and y'all getting all this training and you're getting all this understanding and awareness and you guys are having retreats, but you've left all your team out and you wonder why the culture won't stick.
That's right.
But something interesting about that is that I feel like as a culture, Black people have been trained to follow the rules. And so we see that show up quite a bit in the workplace where it's like, I don't want to do too much. I don't want to, speak too loudly or stand out too much. So I think that there's a cultural shift that needs to happen within families and within us personally that says, your voice is important. Use it where you see fit and say what you actually think so that when we get to work, we're not also battling, trying to unlearn things that we've been taught throughout our lives.
So for me, that's an identity crisis because, think about it, friends. When Obama became president, the whole world, it shook the whole world because we are not used to Black people leading. And that's You know what I mean? It shouldn't have been a big thing, but it was a big thing because we haven't been leading. And I think transformation has to begin on the inside out. So I need to get to a place where I understand that I have worth, I have value, and that I'm not inferior to a white person. And, you know, I remember in 1997, I went to Cape Town for the first time. And I was in a small village. It was mostly a white town. And I decided to go to a white church on purpose. And I knew I'd be the only black person there. And I decided I'd sit right in the middle because I wanted to not call them out, but I wanted to call them in. I wanted to start a conversation. And it was interesting that when I went that Sunday, nobody talked to me, you know. Now, my prejudice side said I knew it. I was like, I knew they wouldn't talk to me. I know those people, you know. Now, I went the second week, and then a white old lady took me home for tea, and we had a conversation. Yeah. Now, I'm a black person coming from a country that was colonized by white people. Now, what did white people do? They used politics. So when we're dealing with racism, I can change my heart on the inside, but if the political system is still oppressive to black people, and this can be applicable in a company as well, the company politics, we have to look at the economics. The reality is that in Zimbabwe, for example, you might have 10, 15 million people and maybe 10,000 white people, but the 10,000 white people are eating most of the economic cake. So you then have to deal with the economic issue that's still imbalanced. And then you have to deal with the social issue because the white people lived in the nice neighborhoods. Now, of course, because blacks are the majority, there's been a bit of a shift there, but that's still an issue. And so I think we need to deal with the pillars that were established to perpetuate racism. So I want to close with this thing. In 2002, the former president who died, Robert Mugabe, he did a bad thing. He went and violently took the land that the white people took 100 years ago. He violently took it from white Zimbabwean citizens. Now, how he did it was wrong, but the issue had to be addressed. So the issue of land inequality was a real issue, but no one was willing to address it. Now, when he addressed it, he didn't do it right because he then perpetuated injustice, with the current generation of white Zimbabweans. But the issue had to be addressed, and no one was addressing the issue. I think we have to be willing to deal with the complex issues if we're going to pull down racism.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Kumbu, politics. You bring up such a good and important topic that I think a lot of Black people are afraid maybe to even touch in those conversations. Before we start talking about politics, Ify, you had some statistics you wanted to share?
Yeah. So you shared something, Kumbu, about when Obama became president, right? The world responded, right? So, and it was like a Black person was the first time we ever led, right? And so I just wanted to share some statistics, right? So racial disparities run deep in American society. They are manifested in different ways in the corporate world, right? So Fortune 500 CEOs, less than 1% are Black. Senior level management, 3.2%, professionals, 8%, and college degree holders, 10% of the U.S. economy. So that's why it was a shock. You're right. We are not, the global is not used to, at least in America, right, seeing this shift, right? Another statistic that this particular item I'm reading from, it is hard to climb the corporate ladder. So the percent of professionals who feel Black employees have to work harder to advance, guess 65% of Black people think it, because we know it. 16% of whites believe that that's the case.
And so often we hear, Black people say, "Oh, I don't do politics. I don't believe in it. I don't want to talk about it." Sonia, can you please share your experiences with those type of conversations or those type of statements that, we say?
Oh my gosh. If I had $1 for every time I got into this conversation with my mentees, I'd be a wealthy, wealthy woman. There are a few things that I want to make sure that I highlight when it comes to politics in the workplace. And so when my mentees would say, "You know what? I don't do politics. I don't want to be a part of that." politics are everywhere because politics are connected to people. So I don't care if you go to church. Don't you go at your church, your places of worship? Aren't there politics?
Politics.
Okay.
That's where we learn them.
Listen to me. Schools, politics.
Hello.
To your home is long.
So wherever there are people, you're going to have this. And what I want everyone who is listening and watching with us today to understand is you have to make a very clear decision from my perspective, and others may have a different perspective. You're either in the game or you're not. And if you decide that you're going to be in the game, you must understand the rules of engagement. Now, the allies that we talked about before, and what the word that I use, mentoring is very important, but mentoring is not the thing that typically helps us get to senior levels. It's sponsorship. So what happens oftentimes is the Black people in the organizations that I worked in didn't have a sponsor. But guess what? So it's always chicken and egg. It's always, the do loop, as I call it. Well, people are not going to advocate for people that they don't know. I said this last week. So what my mentees would say, I'm not coming into the workplace and sharing what's going on in my family and sharing who I am. I have this mask on. I'm going to keep that mask on from 9 to 5, and then I'm going to go be who I am when I leave here. No. Now, I'm not saying tell all your personal business. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to open up enough so that people understand, how do you make decisions? How do you handle crises? How do you step in when something is going wrong, right? You have to be able to help them understand how you lead. And in so many instances, my mentees were not sharing anything about all the awesome things that they were doing and contributing in the organization, because they didn't want to share it. They didn't want to sound like they were bragging, because guess what? In our culture, you don't do that. So a lot of the things that are part of who we are as a Black community and culture, it goes against what you need to be doing in the workplace. And so we have to learn these things and understand how to tap into our voice and greatness. And again, don't view the politics as something all negative. It means that you understand where the real power is. Who's really making the decisions? It's not always the people who have the titles, who have the power. But do you know that because you've studied it? How do you get allies? How do you get people to notice you so that they want to sponsor you, so that they want to mentor you? There are ways to be strategic in doing that. And that's what I want people to understand. If you're going to go full in, if you decide that you want to be a part of the organization at a higher level, there are some things that, and you would never, ever do anything to compromise integrity or authenticity. But there are things and activities that you can do to engage more fully so that people can get to know you and then effectively advocate for you. So I'll stop there because I want to hear what my partners here have to say.
Well, one of our viewers said, and I think I'm gonna have to agree with her on this one. We just posted it on the screen in case you and if anybody didn't see it. She said that Black people have been trained to follow the rules, point blank and period. So if we are trained just to follow the rules, how are we as Blacks going to ever get ahead in life? If we're just here and we're just continuously following the rules, how are we to ever get ahead? Now, who's going to answer that question?
Can I ask another question to make it more complicated?
Of course.
And this is a controversial statement, but somebody said Black people have left the ghetto, but we've not arrived to the city. So we've left the ghetto, or in my context, we've left the village, but we've not arrived because Sonia, you were basically saying, if I'm going to go to the city, if I'm going to be a leader in New York has rules, and I need to be able to play the game at the level that's required. But the problem is that maybe there's an incomplete paradigm shift where I'm actually stuck. My mind is in the ghetto, though my body is in the boardroom.
Yes.
I really think that all of that, the solution to all of that starts at home.
Absolutely.
People need to let Black kids be carefree.
Yeah.
I think that we overparent and over-discipline our children because we're afraid. And what it does is suppresses free thought. And we need to be encouraging them to think outside of the box, think for themselves, trust their own instincts, start to hone their decision making. We all have our synapses and how they're set up. And the way things are clicking and firing in our brain, we're born that way. And instead of trying to push kids to be one way, I think what we need to be encouraging them to do is learn to understand how they think and allow them to curate their strengths as opposed to trying to get them to fit into a specific mold. Because I do think that shows up in the workplace, like I said earlier, in the form of, wanting to be meek, not wanting to stand out. If you notice, it's not the ones that are actually playing by the rules and being meek that get ahead. Right. I had a wonderful mentor or I'll say a sponsor at my first year at the consulting firm, and she was a savage, okay? Like she said whatever she wanted, how she pleased in a meeting, and that ended up being effective. And it is a result of her knowing who she is, how she communicates, and doing that fearlessly is something that I picked up on right away. And when we talk about politics, especially in the workplace, like Sonia said, you have to study the environment, or as people say now, read the room. That's popular on social media. I don't know why people are saying that on Instagram all of a sudden, but yeah, read the room so that, you understand who's where. And people need to, of course, gravitate and build genuine relationships with whoever you gravitate towards. But in addition to that, be paying attention to how the VP responds to the certain mid-level executives. Who's getting the clout? Who are they? Whose ideas are being pushed forward? And if you have things or initiatives that you need pushed forward, you know where the power is. And to do that, you need to understand how it's laid out. So you have to study, but also you need to speak out, be yourself, and understand how you think and go with your own decision making.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, 51 Ways to Love Your Children, because so many people that I was working with, mentoring, coaching, would talk about how they were reared. And I saw lots of differences, and I studied this. And I would go to the mall, or I would go to a restaurant, and I would observe Black families, and I would observe white families and other ethnicities. At the mall, I could tell, I couldn't even keep count on one hand the number of times that, and so I'm going by observation, so I'm not making a generalization right now. I'm telling you what I saw, what I'm getting ready to say. The number of times the Black mother said, "Stop it, be quiet, stop it, be quiet. No, I'm doing it," or whatever. And then I would see other groups, in particular, when I was doing my studying, I would observe white families, and it would be Tim or Timmy. What do you think about so-and-so? Or Tina, what's your opinion? The conversations were very different. And I said, my gosh, we have got to get to a place within our communities, within our families, where we are asking our children their opinions, where we are helping them to learn how to critically think. And Efi, you know this, and Latricia, that's why the Sister Accord Leadership Development Program that we into at Cincinnati Public Schools focuses so much on critical thinking, because oftentimes our students can't tell you why they believe a certain thing or why they feel a certain way about something. And so that I am totally with you, Carlyn. We have got to, this starts at home.
Yeah.
This starts at home.
I tell people all the time, I want my nephew to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. Nobody is more confident at work or in life than a mediocre white man. And when we are out and we're doing our thing, even if we're doing something as simple as taking as a walk, Zion, which way do you want to go, left or right? He says, I think we should go left because the dump trucks are down there. Cool, we're going left because the dump trucks are down there. And it's a small thing. But what he's learning to do is to trust himself in his own, his own choices.
Mm-hmm. When I'm listening to what you're saying and thinking about mentors and sponsorships, right? And I just can't help myself but think about the fact that we need a safe space to practice. Right. So, in our trainings and in the development trainings and the work that we do with clients, we always have leadership theater, right? Where people can practice these skills in a safe environment, because I don't know about y'all, but I don't want the doctor to read a book, watch a webinar, or go to a 6-day training and be trying to tell me how to do a facelift on me. Right. And so so we have to incorporate this, this ability to practice, right? Role model, role play, scenario based, right? And I say that because for me, it was instilled in me as a child, right? My dad would take us to his office. I don't know, maybe it was just me always in the basement, but anyway, that's a different discussion. And he would say, okay, so when I'm at work, this is the question. This is what I'm trying to understand. So what do you think we should say here? Or what do you think it should be this? And how should we do that? And how should this look, right? By taking us to work-based events, right? Well, this is how you should, this is how you maneuver. This is how you conduct yourself, right? He was giving me an opportunity at an early age to practice leadership skills, right? And so how do we do that in the home? But also how you do that in the workplace, right? These conversations as a leader can be intimidating, scary, frightening, and all of that stuff, right? But can you put together some scenarios that don't have nothing to do with nobody in the room? Because everybody can always get with some mysterious folks, right? Oh, I could be Tim and Tina. I don't know who they are. They ain't my life. I can, woohoo, yes, I can play that role. And so how do you maybe even have dialogue, right, around a book study or around other people, where you can give people the opportunity to try this stuff on in a safe environment, right?
Exactly. But you got to give people safe spaces. Young people. You got to give them safe spaces, sister and brothers on the line, because I keep telling folks, you can't shame people into being anti-racist. Nope. You can't shame people into all of a sudden one day, expecting them to change. We have to have we have to do the hard work, and that's the hard work. So I will continue to say that just to remind us that it's a lot of heavy lifting in this, but those spaces are critical.
Jesiah, I'm gonna let you talk, but I got this question: how do you create a safe space? If it's difficult and as hard as it is, and you guys know this in the corporate world, I don't care where you work, it's hard to create a safe place for people or a safe space for people. I keep hearing you say, we got to have a safe space. We got to have a safe space. How do individuals create that safe space? Okay, Jesiah, you itching for a scratch? Go for it.
Well, no, I'm just hanging out with you guys. But on the other edition, I talked about how as a Black man, for me personally, there aren't many spaces that I feel are safe. So if you look at it like a pool of water and you can't swim, sometimes we approach this work like it's sink or swim. Either you learn how to swim or you're going to die. And so I think that we have a responsibility as individuals to teach the other people around us how to swim well in uncomfortable, difficult, dangerous spaces. And the reason that's an important skill is this. If you don't teach me to survive and I find myself in an environment that's not safe, now I'm not equipped enough to be able to do what I need to be able to do. And so sometimes we set people up for failure because they're not prepared for these spaces, and we're hoping that they're going to be safe. And then they get there and they drown and they die. And so we got to prepare people for uncomfortable spaces and how to be in a hostile environment. We teach them how to swim when you're in there. So we have a responsibility. And personally, assume the space is not safe. And again, that's just me and my own issues and challenges. But I assume it's not safe, and I try to find people to teach me how to be a better swimmer, so that no matter what kind of water it is, I'm doing backstrokes while other people are struggling. But I also have a responsibility to teach other people how to swim better than I can too. So I don't know if it's so much about creating a safe space, and if you can, please, I'm not faulting anybody for doing that. I'd rather be the best swimmer in dangerous water than expecting a space to be safe.
Can I add to that? Because I've noticed in our context that you're a Black person, you become the first Black person of an organization. Sometimes the first people to pull you down will be other Black people, because they were used to having white people lead. And so actually you're looking for, we talked of an alliance, you're looking for people to support you, but actually you might actually have to stand on your own. You're going to have to be a transformational leader that actually pioneers a path in a wilderness. No one's been there, And I think we do need to let people understand that they may not be a safe place. And so that's why you need to have a robust vision. You need to be a transformational leader. You have to be, a Martin Luther King in your sphere of influence. And that's why I love this thing that we're all leaders. There's a Martin Luther King in each and every one of us, but it's in your sphere, it's in your shape, your calling, your gifting. And I think once we understand that, then we don't set ourselves up for failure and disappointment. We have a saying back home, we talk about a PhD, pull him down syndrome, pull him down. And many times the person that pulls you down, the gatekeepers of patriarchy sometimes are women, so you're trying to speak up for women, and then you have other women saying, hey, keep the men there, keep them there.
Yes. Yeah, it's a mindset. It's a mindset.
It's the mindset.
Yep. And I the way that I have created safe spaces for people, listen, it wasn't a joyride coming into the automotive industry. And I told y'all I'm 25, so it wasn't that long ago. But back when I started in the 90s, I mean, talk about rough. It was rough. But what I decided to do was, am I going to leave a legacy? Am I going to pull some people behind me? Am I going to leave this place better than where I found it? Well, that takes a lot of determination, and it takes a lot of selflessness, right? You can't serve others if you're scared. I'm sorry. And there's so many leaders and people who are in these seats who are scared. That's going to be a problem. So what I did, because I didn't do please don't be a lone ranger. Please don't try to do this stuff by yourself. We have to find allies. We have to find people who believe in what we believe in. And once I was able to find those people at all levels, don't go just up. Have peers, have people who are lower in the organization, or if you're entry level, making sure that you bring your peers along, but find people who believe in what you believe. And you all begin to create those safe spaces. That's what we did in the automotive industry. I'm sure some of my girlfriends are on right now. We did it, and people said it couldn't be done. So is it easy? Absolutely not. But you have to be strategic and methodical in what you decide you're going to prioritize in order to address the inequalities or whatever it is that you feel like you need to address. And so, Sandy, coming back to your question, the way that I created those safe spaces was to find people who believed in what I believed in. And if we all felt like we wanted everybody to have a seat at the table, we wanted to really, truly value diversity, not just throw it around, then we had some work to do, and we did it. We did the work.
This really reminds me of the quote, we as Black leaders, as ally leaders, we must be dedicated to lift as we climb. We must be dedicated to help those around us, must be dedicated to offer that grace in that space, to allow people to practice really utilizing their voices, practice being confident in these uncomfortable situations. I'm going to shift the conversation just a little bit, just a small shift. What do you guys think about anti-racism policies in the workplace? anti-racism policies in the workplace? Are they good? Are they bad? Do they work? Do you see benefit? Not? What are your thoughts? Let's start with you, Carlyn. What are your thoughts of anti-racism policies in the workplace?
So long, deep breath. Let that wash over you.
Listen. It's not that I'm not a fan of the idea. It's the execution that usually makes me itch. Mm-hmm. It is something. Black people are complaining, so I guess we gotta figure out how to slap something together and put it out there. And I don't really need that. Okay, don't do that for me. If we're really going to be anti-racist in the workplace, that one, it needs to come from the top down. If you tell me that you are anti-racist, but you can't find a single Black executive to be sitting in your boardroom, I don't know what we're talking about here. Because at this point, I'm not really interested in talking points. I'm not really interested in seminars that I got to sit through because y'all are racist. I'm not interested in any of that. What I want to see is equity. I want a share in this, and not me personally, but is your board truly reflective of your company? I want to know what you're doing to retain African Americans in your organization, or are they dropping out because they can't fit in culturally?
Let's see the receipts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me see the tangible receipts. It is not lost on me that I don't know how to say this politically, but it is not lost on me that my Black female peers who were less willing to assimilate were pushed out. Mm-hmm. I played the game because I knew that's what needed to be done, right? But that's not right. They should be able to come to work and be, Black as they want to be, and be recognized for their talents. It's not that they weren't smart. It's not that they weren't competent. It's that they were too Black. And so when we talk about all these racial sensitivity, anti-racism, policies and seminars, I don't want it. I'm done with it. What I need to see is real equity. Are you making room for me at your organization? To me, that would be so much more meaningful and effective.
Yeah, I absolutely. And so I have a couple things. I was so honored to be able to, for Procter & Gamble, partnered with another company, and we took all of their advertising agencies through unconscious bias. Now that is huge. Okay. Really huge for those of you who are, who really understand the significance of that, because companies with these policies, you cannot, I always say it has to be 360 degrees. So we can't just focus on the internal piece. How are you showing up externally? How are you advertising to Black folks? Do you know what Black folks need? Do you understand their lifestyle enough to recognize how your products can serve them? Right? So it's a 360. So what are your supplier diversity plans? How do you serve internally? How do you serve externally with customers and consumers? So when Procter & Gamble, and we focused on the beauty agencies, I mean, my gosh, that was groundbreaking. So how these policies and the work that comes out of these policies is really important. Now, when I was at Ford, the CEO said, hey, we're going to tie these senior leaders' bonuses, we're going to tie them to your diversity efforts. Right? So that caused a big uproar because people are like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't even have a system that is able to effectively bring this to life. So we have to be so careful. So what's happening now? Companies are throwing hundreds of millions of dollars and saying, oh, let's give $100 million to NAACP, or let's give it to whoever. That's not the way to do it. So it depends on again, you got to sit down and determine what are we solving for, and then put in the priorities based on what we're solving for. But to think that we can have these blanket Band-Aid approaches with these anti-racist policies, anti-racism policies, it doesn't work, because what equity looks like in your culture may be different for someone else. Okay, so when you put these blanket kinds of statements and actions in place, nothing ever happens, because the system itself isn't set up to effectively support it.
The system. You make a very good point, Sonia. Kumbu, did you have something to add?
Yes, if you change the hardware without changing the software, you'll lose it all. And I think what we're doing is that because we want to project an image, and what usually happens is that the government will pass a law, and governments think masses, they don't think individuals. So they pass this law. So in South Africa, we've done that. We've said, every company must have a BBB status. So, how many black people do you have on the board? How many black people, so you have all this, but we're dealing with the hardware, but we're not dealing with the software. And I think if we have to address both, unfortunately, governments and boards of companies don't have the time to do that, because they're thinking about the bottom line. And so they will basically window dress so that we can move on with the conversation. I love what Carlyn was saying, that actually we end up doing it so that the crowd can say, we've done the workshop, but actually we're actually not dealing with the real issues.
Yeah. In some cases, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jesiah.
I apologize. It's something Sonia said that was right on, where she said equity can look differently depending on where you are. There's really three things. There's legislation, there's education, and then there's the work. Depending on where you are, you might need something different. There are certain groups that the education might not be their issue, but doing the work might be their problem. There are other groups where they might struggle so much there might actually need to be some hardcore legislation to put the areas so to make you be successful. So I think it's really understanding what your environment is, what equity looks like in your environment, and then prescribing the right thing to fix the issue. And I think that there are some issues where people are addressing it the incorrect way because they don't really know what the issue is. So, as an example, the issue might be doing the work, and they're spending all the time educating people. When people understand it, but they don't know how to apply it, and so on and so on and so on. So, really understanding what your culture looks like and then how to fix it is important. Last thing I want to say is this: you cannot. A doctor can or should not diagnose him or herself. And so there are some times when it's helpful to bring an outside group or agency or person to help address or evaluate or audit some of the things that you're going through, because it's really easy. If I'm trying to evaluate myself, there are some things I might overlook because I want to, or some things I might be really, really critical on, and I might not need to. And so that's another piece there when you're trying to create equity for your specific environment.
Yeah, very good point. Sandy, I'll come to you, and then Ify, just to hear your thoughts on the conversation. But this talk and this conversation around equity, I think a lot of times people confuse equity to equality. Two very different things. Equity
can you say
and
it for the people
equality.
in the back? They didn't hear it.
Equity and equality are two different things. Did y'all hear me?
Yes.
Y'all hear me?
We're gonna put it in the comments for you so you can read it too.
Right. Okay, Sandy and then Ify. Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, let me go back. I think with all of our discussion and what we're talking about now, I think the biggest thing is we do have to educate people on all of it. To educate one, to help them understand the differences between racism, prejudice, equity, equality. It's all about educating others. So I think at the end of the day, the important piece on it is how do we educate others on all of these topics that we're talking about, whether it's equality. Will we ever be equal? Will we ever think that we're going to ever be equal to the white man or to the white lady? Can that ever happen? Will it ever happen? Have I seen it happen in my environment where I work now? I ain't never seen it happen. Never in my 20 plus years of working in law enforcement have I ever seen women created equal or things done the same for women. I have not seen that. Can it happen? Maybe it can, but we have to be educated on it.
Have to
Equality.
be very intentional.
What's equality?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all education. It's all about educating each other and the others.
And that is what we are doing this evening. All teach, all learn. It's all about education, really instilling into all of the viewers, everybody that's watching now, everyone that may watch the recording, but it's all just educating. What can we do from this point forward? What can we do to really make a difference just around this conversation? So those of you that are watching via YouTube or Facebook, please keep the questions in the comments rolling.
They help us. Yeah, they keep us energized. And, you know, I'm going to talk about equity. So, you know, when we think about equity, it is about ensuring that those that I have what I need so that I can get equal outcomes. Right. And so, you know, if it is, you know, if the outcome is, I'm going to go to my education background for just a moment. If the outcome is that all third graders should be reading on time by the time they leave the third grade, then just giving everybody a tutor does not mean that that's equity, right? By just making sure, you know, that equity as far as equal outcomes, right? So there's, you know, there's work to be done when equity is a moving, evolving work in progress. It's never going to stop because everybody's individual needs are different. And I know we'll say things like, well, we can't, you know, I have to make a policy and I can't customize a policy to individual needs. I've got to put a procedure in place. I can't customize a procedure to individual needs, right? We get it, right? But when we don't think about those customizations, right? We don't think about how are we going to create equity, right? I mean, I think that equity is possible. And if we can achieve equity, then there's equal outcomes on the other side. But until we get to equity, we can't get to equality, right? And we know there's work to be done in all kinds of sectors and shape, right? And I think somebody said, I think Sandy said something, right? Like, you know, what are we willing to give up? We're so in love with our comfort, right? That I'm not willing to make a sacrifice for humanity. I can't sacrifice. If I have to give up something in order for this to happen, I don't do that. Or maybe I'm only willing to do this much, right? But am I willing to sacrifice for the good of humanity, right? And that's about giving up privilege. That's about giving up power, right? That's about leveraging your privilege and leveraging your power, right? Am I going to speak up as an individual, as an active ally, right? Not just, oh yeah, that. And when I go home, I'm gonna text my friends, or I'm gonna text the person, and be like, hey, you know, that was really rough what they did to the meeting today. Well, you should have said that in the meeting, right? So, you know, it's that action, right? And so, you know, the quote by Gandhi is, I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. That's about sacrifice. That's about shifting your decision making, the action that you take.
Can I drop something there? So there's equality as a worldview. That's the belief system. So I can, as a woman or as a Black man, every woman needs to get to a point where they have a worldview that says I'm equal, even if everyone else doesn't believe they are equal, even if they don't treat you as equal. You need to have a belief system that says you're equal, and then the equity becomes the trunk of the tree. That's now what people are talking about. And then the equality that manifests now, because the equality we're talking about in the natural, that's now manifesting as results. I think so. We need the concept of equality to be embraced in the mind of every individual, that I have value, that I'm worth. I'm worth. Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. He would have done it if there were no other people. So I'm worth all that to God. And I think part of the problem is that we sometimes deal with the stuff that's on the surface but we haven't solved the world view. So I go into meetings. Let me close with this one. Have you noticed that in Genesis chapter 3, I'm going to throw some scripture. When the curse, remember when Adam and Eve sinned, there was the curse. And part of the curse was he will rule over you. So I've actually been telling people we will not be able to deal with racial domination if we don't deal with gender inequality. Because the first conflict between human beings was a man. The curse was he will rule over you. And she accepts that. And then she says she would desire him. So women are socialized to desire men for their identity. And men are socialized to dominate women for their identity. So unless we deal with the concept of equality as a world view, whether it's men oppressing women or white men oppressing a black man, the idea of worldview then becomes critical.
Now, you know, we can't be here till 10 o'clock. What time is it over there? I think, isn't it past midnight over there? Woo! You on fire for 1 o'clock in the morning. Woo! Yes.
And I'm awake.
Yeah, I think it was Angela Davis who said, you know, we can't have Black men or white women leading the charge for equality because a lot of their identity is wrapped up in achieving the same status as white men. And the problem with white men's power.
Say that one more time. Say that slow for some of us. Listen a little slower.
Yeah, and the problem with that being white men's power has always been associated with oppressing someone else. White women and Black men are in a unique position because they are both oppressed and have the opportunity to oppress. So as a white woman, I can oppress through racism, but I am oppressed through sexism. Same for Black men. I can oppress through sexism, but I am oppressed by racism. So what you said, Kumbu, was really stood out to me because we kind of have to come up with a new North Star. What does that equality actually look like when we achieve it? Because if we all set out to everybody having what white men have now, because they're the party in power for the most part in every country you go to, you know, we have to kind of rethink what we want our North Star to be because we don't want to rebake different kinds of oppression into our future.
Wow.
That's good. That's deep.
Very good. So as we, you know, start to just wrap up the conversation, I mean, we threw a lot out in this conversation. It was so rich. It had so many layers. I mean, it was like one conversation, one statement just really opened up the box to a whole new conversation. So, but as we wrap and we just kind of put it all together, let's share some strategies. What are some action steps to all of this that we talked about? I mean, we talked about equality. We talked about racism. We talked about prejudice. We talked about politics. We talked about sponsorship versus mentorship. What are some strategies that we can share with all of our viewers and also share with each other on how can we take just this conversation and move it forward into the world?
Who's going first, Ms. Jones?
We will let's start with you, Ify.
Oh, not because I'm sitting here.
Yeah, you're right here. Let's start.
You know, I like to bring it home. So I would say, I'm going to say this as a strategy. So one, so there's 3 pillars to this approach to me. I like 3 pillars. I don't know why, but 3 is an unbalanced name. It's an unstable number, right? Which makes it volatile for change. So one, what am I going to do for myself, right? I've got to do individual work as a whatever color leader, whatever race leader, whatever gender leader, right? As a leader, right? I said it before, everyone's a leader. I have to do work on my own, right? Get in your basement, your garage, whatever, and get busy doing the work, right? What books do I need to read? What articles do I need to read? What webinars do I need to read? What is my goal, right? So you got to have a goal, right? Which means it's tangible, it's obtainable, it's specific and it's measurable and it's time bound, right? So don't just say, oh, I'm gonna just improve my learning, and you don't have nothing to hold you accountable to it, right? So if you need to do, we all need to continue to educate and equip ourselves. You know, if you don't like reading, you know, listen to something, right? Listen to webinars, listen to different components. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of conversation to tune into, but make the commitment to do the work on developing yourself, right? And then I think too, it's about community, right? So who am I going to engage with, right? Because we, like Sonia said, you can't do this by yourself in isolation, right? We just continue to perpetuate silos, and that could be a whole nother discussion of family, community, and workplace on the silos, right? The only thing I want to store in silos is salt and grain. And so, you know, when we think about how am I going to connect with others, that will challenge me, right? If you get in the room and all y'all saying the same thing, listen, iron sharpens iron. A dull knife is not going to sharpen a sharper knife, right? But, you know, just it doesn't mean that my knife is dull in the negative sense, right? But, you know, after you use it so many times, you got to keep it sharp, right? So get in a space where you're connecting with people who will challenge you and hold you accountable, and set a time bound. When you're going to do it by, how often are you going to do it? How are you going to measure if it's working, right? And then I think the third one is, what am I going to make a commitment to? And community can be family, right? So it can be your community, neighbors, you know, associations, groups, affiliations, clubs, civic groups, your swimming pool. Okay. And then I think the third is, you know, is to do some self-care, right? I mean, I think you got to have some self-care in there. You got to have some balance in there to take you through taking action, right? So I'm sorry, that's not three. That's kind of back to one, is you got to do some self-care. But the third one is I have to take action. What am I going to do with what I've learned? Who am I going to go have a conversation with? Am I going to start a group? What action that has impact? Okay. Because just being busy does not lead to impact, right? We need impact. We need to make a move. We need to make a shift. And so just being busy and just going and having tea with somebody may not be the impact that you at your level can have, right? So what level and privilege are you afforded that you can have a certain level of impact in, and how do you take action consistently? So don't just do one thing, even if it takes you a year. Don't do one thing and then stop. This is a lifelong commitment. These are leadership skills and leadership practices and a leadership lifestyle that should be in your book. And this is how you live.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. Jesiah, we're going to come to you next. Everybody has a why. Everybody has a why. What is important to you? How do you want to get that message out? How are you going to take action? What is your plan? Jesiah?
That's really good. So Ify was talking, I was really thinking through, you know, there really are two philosophies. One, and neither is wrong. I've heard both. One philosophy says you can't make change from within. I don't disagree, but I understand it. And some say, hey, everybody doesn't have the luxury of leaving an environment. So if you're in an environment, one, learn to equip yourself with the tools and the skills necessary to not just survive in that environment, but to be successful in that environment. Surround yourself with, I call them a board of directors. I've heard sponsors on this as well, of people that can support you and help you to grow, and you can develop, and you can help them to develop. And that's really important. So you can create the change that you really want to see. If you're deciding to remove yourself from a particular environment, and that's okay, you know, all plants don't grow in all soil. Like I'm trying to be a gardener here in my house, and I don't know how good I am. I'm okay, but there's certain plants that grow better in certain soil. Find a soil that helps you to grow the best, you know, and surround yourself with the things that help you to grow. You can be successful, and as you grow and as you produce the fruit that you want to produce, don't forget about the other people that are around you. So I think it's really kind of deciding which is the best path for you. And knowing that every path isn't the best. As an example, I work in nonprofit. Our approach to diversity and inclusion and equity is a little different for someone that might work in the for-profit world. We don't have certain clubs or groups the same way that, you know, it's just the approach is different. So I think understanding where you are and what you need to be successful is probably the most important first step that you have to make. That will dictate the steps you take after that. The biggest thing I would probably say is believe in yourself. Know that you do matter. Know that God loves you. And when all these things come together, there's nothing that you really can't do.
Yes, you matter. Your voice matters. Your position matters. Your feelings, your emotions. Yes, that's great, Jesiah. You matter. Carlyn.
I think that I would add just getting really introspective, understanding what your strengths are and playing to those without fear. I would add also understanding your sphere of influence, because all of us are influential somewhere. So take inventory of where that is for you, and understanding your place in all of this so that you know what to do in your sphere of influence, I think is my best advice. And I know that sounds, just kind of lofty and not very solid, but the personal work when we're dealing with racism is really, really important. We were talking earlier about, being fearless and speaking up when you get in the workplace, but you have to have the confidence to do that. We talked about, raising children to be fearless thinkers, but when you get knocked down, how are you going to respond to that? So, I guess my strategy is introspection.
Great. Sonia.
A theme that I have been spending a lot of time on with my mentees and clients as well is around language. I think we have to be very mindful of the language that we are using right now. Is it going to engage or is it going to repel? If you think about the Underground Railroad, like there were people who were white people who were totally against slavery and was like risking their lives, right? So what we have seen after the George Floyd incident is we've seen people all over the world of all different backgrounds, ethnicities, who are saying enough is enough. There are a lot of people who are still trying to figure out where they are on this continuum, brothers and sisters. They're trying to figure it out, and they're listening, and they're tilting the head. If any of you have a dog, the dog is like looking at you sideways, trying to figure out, okay, now what am I getting ready? What's my role in this? And if we don't use the right language, I think we got this window. I talked about it last week. We got this window. If we are using the wrong language, I think that window is going to close and people are going to say, the way I have always felt about this is how I'm going to still feel about it. And I'm not going to do anything differently. So we have a window and a time to engage differently that I think our language is depending on how we can actually move the needle and really have some conversations about what are we going to do? Because I can't stand sitting around talking about stuff without an action plan. You got to have a plan. We can talk about this stuff until we are blue, till our children's children, are grown. We have to have a plan. And so I have just been saying, let's just be mindful of the language that we are using so that we can get all of these folks out there who are still trying to figure this thing out, who don't understand it, who haven't had to understand it, so that we can bring them in and help them understand what their role is. And like I said, we got this window. And in my opinion, and this is what I've said to clients and other folks, I think that window is going to start closing up the closer we get to the October, November timeframe. It's just me. This is just me talking, where people are going to decide which way they're going to go. And then I think the window, as we have seen it open after the George Floyd incident, I think that it won't be that same level of openness. And so I really want us to have a sense of urgency about engaging with people who are different than we are, and really driving some challenging conversations that says, okay, How do we link arms? How do we link hearts?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get on the same page about what we believe about helping the least of these?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do we use our spirituality and understanding what God desires for our lives to drive what our assignment is and how we walk in it? And then you got to take that and be that in all aspects of your lives, friends. You can't just pick one aspect and say, oh, I'm going to be that over here. But when I come over here, it's going to be another story. No, it has to be consistent in all aspects of our lives so that we can really drive the change that we desire to see.
Absolutely. This is a heart matter.
This is a heart
matter, and how we communicate is important.
It's so important.
Mm-hmm.
It's
we
so
cannot
important.
let that window close. Let that window close without perpetuating what we want to see the future of our children, for us. Go forward.
Absolutely.
Kumbu.
Wow, I want to speak into this window. Thank you so much, Sonia. So this window, there are 5 things. If I had 3, I got 5. Number 1, transformation begins with you. So I want to challenge you, if you're out there, there's a window, and we must all step out of our comfort zones and begin to speak the truth. Let's spread the love, and let's share the message. So number 1, transformation begins with you. Number 2, the heart of transformation. Our motive has to be right. This is the time to deal with our own hurts. The George Floyd thing has revealed some of the undealt issues as well that I might still have. And so this is the time for me to look at the heart of transformation, because transformation begins with you. But if you are an agent of transformation, that if you are fractured as an individual, you won't be able to carry this thing to its intended end. Number 3, values for transformation. We have to define what are the values I'm going to need to sustain this movement. Because if we don't have the right values, so attitude is a value. Our own personal growth, and I like people saying, let's read, let's study around this. Let's look at issues of integrity. Our own level of integrity as we walk this journey is going to be critical. Number 4, systems for transformation. We're going to have to all understand the worldview tree around, understanding how systems work and making a commitment to dealing with systematic racism. And then number 5, the end game. I think we've all watched the movie. For me, the end game is transform society. So for me, racism is not the end game for me. I want to see societies transformed. And racism is one of the giants we're going to have to deal with. But I'm not stopping there. Let's the Bible talks about the kingdom of God. And for me, that's what I'm looking at: holistic transformation. And of course, racism being one of those giants we must deal with.
Thank you. We are just at the tipping point. We are right at the edge, and it is up to us, all of us, to tip it over, to really make change. All right, Sandy, we're going to end with you, and you go ahead and take the show to the end.
Well, let me say thank you so very much, and thank all the listeners and the panelists. But let me say this: you got to watch, you got to listen, you got to learn, and you got to figure out how to become a leader. But you can't do it without a blueprint. My grandmother always used to tell us, every church has a foundation. So build your church, your house, whatever you're going to do with that foundation. We want to thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. After my friend over there in Africa, I can't even say his name, but every time he finished talking, all I want to do is just shout. I just want to break out the praise. Just break out in the praise and shout. Even the dog want a little bit of it, because every time he says something, I just want to throw my hands in the air. I believe in shouting. I believe in giving God the praise. But watch, listen, learn, become a leader is most important, because you got to be a change. You got to be a part of the change. In order for you to do that, you got to be a leader. So I thank everybody for tuning in. And y'all know what we do. Before we leave, I'm going to go back to the moderator, because we got to leave you with words of encouragement. I'm more of a listener sometimes than I'm a talker, believe it or not. And I have learned a great deal of a whole lot of stuff in the last 2 weeks. last week and this week. I look forward to doing this again. Is it going to be the same topic? You never know. You have to tune in to Talk Radio and find out on Wind Down Wednesday. Watch, listen, learn, and become a leader. It's all up to you. Back at you, Miss Moderator, Miss Jones.
Sandy, thank you so much for offering up your platform for this conversation that 2B is able to partner with Tuck Radio and really giving this conversation to the world. We're giving it back to you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as Sandy said, we are all going to end with a quote. Sandy, you're going to be last. Let's start with Jesiah. Let's start with Jesiah.
I knew it. Words of wisdom. You're not alone. Sometimes in the work that we do, it makes you feel like you're alone. You're not alone. You have family all over the place that are rooting for you and here to encourage you. Whether it's any of us that are panelists here or people beside you, you're not alone. Believe in yourself, and with God, nothing is impossible.
Great. We're going to go to Sonia, then Carlyn.
I'm going to leave you with the scripture that I use every single day. 1 Corinthians 2:9. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, and the mind cannot even conceive what God has in store for those who love him. I love him, and I have decided that I am going to spend the rest of my life understanding what I need to do to serve his people. I would ask you all to join me. What do you need to do to serve God's people? And at the same time, you will be moving to your next level of excellence.
Well, I'm going to follow the Bible verse with a quote from the famous philosopher / Wingstop owner / rapper Rick Ross, who said, "You're working for your last name and not your first." So in all of this, we've talked about the struggle. We've talked about the fight. I would like for everybody to stay encouraged, stay motivated, stay energized, and understand that even if you don't see the change today, future generations will see it tomorrow.
Kumbu, then Ify.
Wow. For me, if you want to go fast, you will go alone. If you want to go far, take people with you. I need my African American brothers. I need you. We need each other. Let's lock shields, and together we can make a difference.
My quote is perfect to come after that, right? So I'm gonna put a little Drake on the table for you. Sometimes it's the journey that teaches you a lot about the destination. It's not about a destination, right? It's a journey. Take a pit stop, get off at the exit ramp, stop at the Love Hut, the little Love gas station that got all the good candy, and get back on the road, right? It's a journey. Don't quit, stay in it, and thank you for being in it.
My quote, somebody on the panel is really going to recognize my quote. My quote is, life is lived forward, but understood backwards. Spoken wise words of Kumbani. And Sandy, we're going to end with you.
All right, my good people, once again, thank you so very much for tuning in. In order to be a change or make a change, you got to become a person to put yourself in a position for that change. So I need everybody out there to put themselves in a position to help make a change for you, me, and everybody else in our future, because that's what's important. I often say, a lot of times people say, well, those kids are our future. No, the kids, our African-American kids are our now. So we need to put ourselves in a position so we can help them to be better in the long run. And y'all know what I say at the end of my show all the time, because I firmly believe in it, because I've been blessed and highly favored. It's always better to give than it is to receive. And we will see you next week with who knows what. So tune in. See you later. Thanks, guys. Hey, thanks, everybody. Love ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.